Hello everybody, welcome to Deluxe Collectibles, and today I'm going to be discussing the topic of LEGO Ninjago multi-waves, and I'm going to explain what I mean by this, and we're also just going to discuss the potential of us getting some of these in the future for Ninjago, where I think they would work the best. But this topic is coming from a Twitter account that I saw, Daily Ninjago Facts. I've done some video based off of some of their tweets in the past, so I'll be sure to link them down below at the top of the description of the video, so thanks so much to them for this topic here. And it says basically, though originally it was common for Ninjago installments to receive more than one wave of sets, it has not happened recently. The last installment in the theme to get 2 waves was season 6 5 years ago, and the Ninjago movie and Ninjago Legacy also had multiple waves as well. But for those two, I don't really consider them here, at least in this discussion, because of course the LEGO Ninjago movie is technically its own separate theme, and then Ninjago Legacy, I consider it kind of its own separate sub-theme within Ninjago. It's not really connected as much so to the main sort of new season sets like Seabound or the Island or anything of that sort, so I consider that to be individual on its own as well. But what I want to touch on, we're going to explain it here, and then I'll kind of get into how I think they should kind of adapt this into how they do Ninjago sets nowadays. But the last sort of example, as it said in this tweet, was 5 years ago for Skybound, and that was basically where they wound up having, of course, the first wave for Skybound, and then they had a continuation of that where we got some other sets such as the Lighthouse in the new wave, but it was kind of branded under Day of the Departed, so it was a different sort of branding for the actual wave, but of course it was basically a continuation and an add-on of the actual Seabound or Skybound. I keep confusing the two of those, Skybound and Seabound, throughout. I've already recorded this video, now this is the second time, but basically, of course, for Skybound, we wound up seeing that it was sort of a continuation and getting some extra sets based off of that. So I think that was definitely a really smart thing of LEGO to do back then, because then we could kind of get everything from a season, and of course, now that has sort of changed the way that they wind up doing that, and of course, the format of Ninjago has changed as well. Of course, back then at the point of Skybound, we had just the standard 22-minute episodes and the sort of different season length as well, but now of course we have a completely different length for each of the seasons. It varies a lot more now. Of course, you have something like the Island where it was much shorter, then you have of course Seabound, which is a bit longer, you have the Fire and Ice chapters, which is a very long one, but of course now in the new 11-minute episode format, so it changes things up as well, and I think that definitely affects the way that they release sets. And I think that honestly there's positives and negatives to both sides of it. I would say that the way they're doing it now, the main sort of positive is that you're getting out all the sets related to the season as the season, or at least as close as you can be to when the season is airing. So I think that makes the most sense for popularity wise and going with the trend of it. Of course, if you release the Seabound sets, a second wave of them, let's say, where they added some more characters, some more sort of scenes that we wanted to see in LEGO form, or in physical LEGO form, I suppose, then it might not be as relevant at that point, because if you're releasing that later on, especially with how much Ninjago sets we do get now, including Legacy and things like that, then I think it might be a little bit too much almost at that point, so I don't think it would work as well now, but I do think that it was definitely interesting how they went about that to sort of expand it, and I think that's definitely quite useful, because you always hear now with certain waves of missing characters, and characters that we would have wanted to get in the wave, or scenes that we would have wanted to get, vehicles, things like that, just aspects from the season that we don't really wind up seeing. Stuff like, let's say, from the Master of the Mountain, Shintaro, we didn't really get a set for that. Of course, we got the Skull Sorcerer's Dungeon, but that's beneath it. That's not really the actual city of Shintaro, so we didn't really get to see anything from that. So that would be an example where I would say maybe a second wave would have helped with that. We would have been able to kind of flesh it out more and get sort of that area, maybe even if it was just a single set for a second wave, just kind of small expansions like that, I think could work as well. I'm not asking, of course, for a full other 10 sets in a wave. I don't think I'd want to see something like that, because it would probably just destroy my bank account, but I think that it would be kind of interesting to sort of see them adapt that into this format, and I think there's definitely room for it. But I also do think there's the aspect as well, of course, of that we have Ninjago Legacy now, and eventually, as long as Ninjago keeps going at the the pace that it is, I mean, we're going to one day, of course, very far off in the future, but we're going to catch up to the seasons that we're at now at this point, and then most likely getting Ninjago Legacy sets for things like the island, Seabound, stuff like that, where we might have missed out on aspects of it, and now we're getting them in Ninjago Legacy. So I feel like that also works as well, and it can also kind of capitalize on the sort of idea of like nostalgia, basically. Of course, I'm not saying Ninjago at that point is going to be super old or anything like that, or at least those seasons specifically, but still kind of that sort of idea of, hey, look, I love that season when that released. Oh, it's so cool that now we have some more expansions for that. We have some of the sets that I would have liked to have seen at the time, but now we're getting them. So I think it can sort of work in that format as well, and I think that's one of the main positives of Legacy, but I think there's different sorts of ways to look at it. I think it's definitely quite interesting. I did like the idea of sort of having the multiple waves for the seasons, or at least one or two waves, I suppose, is more so what it commonly was, but I think that was kind of nice. Split it up a little bit, give people some time, but also I feel like the way they're doing it now works quite well, especially with getting like 2 seasons of Ninjago every year. I think that that works out pretty well. Also, kind of with the amount of sets that we're getting, I think it's already a pretty good quantity of them, so I think the way they're doing it works, but I just feel like it's interesting to sort of speculate on how they could possibly integrate multiple waves into like a specific season. So let me know your thoughts on all of that down below. Let me know if you would like to see multiple waves return for Ninjago for future seasons, or do you like the way that they're formatting it at the moment? I don't have an issue with it personally, but I think that there definitely could be some cool experimentation that they could do with this idea in the future. But thanks so much for checking out the video. I really do appreciate it. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like down below. Also subscribe as well if you would like to check out some of my other content. That would be highly appreciated. So thank you so much. I will see you all next time, and always remember, keep on collecting.